You know, if you think about it, and you know what the end result was in Georgia and how the Republican candidate surprised a lot of folks by ultimately pulling that race out. But the fact of the matter is, most of the polls that were taken right prior to that had a sudden momentum flip to John Ossoff, that he was going to edge it out. And some have him up by, as you saw there, about 7 points. But bottom line, he was favored in this late surge, and not her, except this last one. This last one had it right, almost to the 0.1%. The man behind that poll, the GOP pollster, Trafalgar Group senior strategist, Robert Cahaly. Robert, good to have you.
Good to be here.
What did you see that all those other polls were missing?
Well, I think it starts with an understanding that, you know, as campaigns modernize, polling needs to modernize as well. We've seen too many changes, and it's not keeping up. I mean, a lot of folks are out there, and they're polling, you know, as if it were the 1990s. I mean, things have changed. People don't, you know, necessarily have home phones.
What does that mean, Robert? What do you do differently or poll differently than they?
Well, I think there are four main factors that should be affecting your polling if you're going to keep up. First, recognizing that phone interviews alone aren't going to do the trick. You've got to pay attention to social media. You've got to really dig into it and look at what's being said on the ground in the district and spend some time talking to folks in the district, real folks on the ground in the district. Two, your list. So often, your poll is only as good as your data. And today, it seems to me, if you're going to be a good pollster, you have to be good at data analytics. You have to decide which people you're going to call, who are going to be your likely voters. Third is surveys. These surveys, the old-fashioned 5-10-minute surveys, just aren't going to work. Who has that kind of time? The average person needs a quick survey. The data can tell you all the demographics you would have had to ask them anyway. I guess I look at it this way. The kind of person who has time to give you a survey for 10 minutes, how much can they really relate to average people? How much is their life relatable? And it just doesn't work. And the last thing is, you have to recognize that with all the voter shaming and everything that's been going on, people might not tell you the truth when you get them on the phone. And so you have to work around that, and that comes down to some of the personal interviews you do on the street and getting at the right way to ask the questions, and then being a little more clever to try to figure out what people really think versus what they're just going to say straight off.
Robert, do you think the same applies to the numbers that Donald Trump is getting? I mean, you have very low approval numbers. He says they're much higher. Rasmussen has them up at a higher approval level than all these other surveys. I don't know who's right, but is his support, are his positives being underrepresented?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think you have a fundamental flaw that nobody seems to want to talk about. We spend all this time in doing all these polls in an election year, and we're calling voters. And then all of a sudden the election's over, and we start calling everyone. No voter list to back it up, and it's just the general public. It's really silly to let opinions of people who don't even bother to vote so skew these results.
So when we break that out, trying to adjust for that by going to likely voters or voters. You say they still are not doing that.
Yeah, a lot of these opinion polls are saying this average people. I was in a debate about this a few months ago, and they're saying, well, you're leaving these people out. And I'm like, hey, guess what? If you want to be included, why don't you vote? You have to have something to underpin your survey, something that shows that they're involved. So we see a difference when we actually poll people who participate. And also when you're doing some of those surveys, you're not necessarily calling people that aren't even necessarily citizens. I think it's very important to focus polling on people that are the ones who participate in elections.
Real quickly then, Rob, do you think that Republican support then is under, or is there a factor by which you add because it's understated?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think it's Republican support so much. I think it's support for this president, and I think you see that in a lot of these. I always say it's like having a 5-person family. It doesn't really matter what the kids want. Mom and Dad decide what we have for dinner.
That's very well put. Well, congratulations to you, Robert. It's an interesting and common sense methodology. Robert Cahaly, who once again proved all the experts wrong, and I mean severely wrong.